Hi and welcome to tonight's Facebook Live about the elements of an individual who is intuitive. Sounds a bit of a mouthful, doesn't it? What is an intuitive individual? That's what I'd like to talk with you about tonight, and perhaps we can burst a few myths, look at a few things. Hi Amanda, thank you for joining. Hi Fanula, good to see you here too. And Bronwyn. So there's 4 of us. Mary Ann makes 5. So there's a nice little group coming together here so that we can explore being an intuitive individual. Now we've got Julie. And so basically, what's important about it? Why do we need to even think about being an intuitive individual? Is there a relevance? Does it make a difference in the world? Yeah, it does. If we operate through the 5 elements, then we work in harmony with the divine, with universal energy. Hi Anita, nice to have you here. If we don't work with our intuition and the 5 elements, then we work with mass consciousness. So elements of an intuitive individual aren't just about earth, air, fire and water, as important as they are. It's about ether. Because ether is spirit. Ether's our higher self. It's that connection that we have to universal wisdom, and without it, we don't live as intuitive individuals. We live as individuals, yes, but we live as individuals who are constrained by mass consciousness and by our fears and our doubts. Hi Clara, hi Sarupa, nice to have you here. I said there are 5 elements, and there are. Most people work with 4. What's really interesting to me is that a long time ago, John talked about common sense in a conversation that I was having with him. Common sense is when we use all of our senses in common, in other words, as a common goal, and we're working towards it. Most people only think of the 5 senses. But when we use the 6th, our 6th sense, everything else starts to make sense. Because the 6th sense, ether, is our connection to the universal realms. It's where the bigger picture is stored. It's where we can see all that's potentially available to us. And once we use the 6th sense to harness the other 5 senses, we've really got it made. Hi Bronwyn, hi Vicky, nice of you to be here. So to be an intuitive individual, it's not about thinking or feeling with the emotional body first. It's about connecting to the heart, to our intuition, and allowing it to show us what's possible. And then we can use the other senses to bring it all together. Then we have a plan, a blueprint, however you want to phrase it, that's created by our higher self, and that our mental body and our emotional body can get their teeth into. So the mind can say, well, yeah, I know where we're going now, and these are the steps I can see. And the emotional body says, finally, I've got a vision, I've got a map. And it's exciting. And then, if we're truly intuitive, we allow our intuition to step in and say to our mind, yep, you've got a plan. However, hold on to the light. Don't step into your judgments about yourself that say you can't fulfill this plan. It says to the emotional body, don't step into your fear that you're not enough to make it work. An intuitive individual is somebody that recognizes that there's a fear or a doubt and says, however, My guidance says this is possible, so I'm going to take one step after another and see where it takes me. And in that way, ether then becomes your guide. Spirit is your guide. Fire becomes the aspiration and motivation to fulfill what ether is giving to you. Air becomes how you communicate what that aspiration or motivation may be. Water is the empathy that you give to yourself and the path that you're following that says, I don't have to be perfect to do this. I just need to do it. And earth is where you take that first step at a physical level and you start to walk your spiritual path. That's where your purpose becomes grounded in life and in light. So if you want to live as an intuitive individual, it starts with your intuition first. It starts with your heart. It starts with the guidance that you're being given. It doesn't start with you arguing with your guidance about whether it's accurate, whether you're capable, because that's not about intuition, that's about mind. And if any of you have a comment or a question as I'm talking about it, I'm happy to answer them. But for me, as an intuitive individual, probably the biggest element it's provided for me is a sense of certainty that I have a place in the scheme of things that no one else can take because it's my place. And it's up to me how well I fit that place. Julie says, are we born using intuition, lose it, then need to re-establish it through contrast and life experience? Not necessarily. Many people are, yes. So it's a good question to ask. A lot of people start out intuitive and then they're told not to do it. I can remember as a child I used to see spirit until one day my mom said to me, don't talk about it, they'll lock you away. And so I shut down, and it was only years later that I felt I could open up again. So we can lose the sense of it, but we never actually lose the intuitive aspect of ourselves. We just close the door. And then when we open that door, it's there waiting for us. But what usually happens is at that point, we demand that it proves itself. Whereas it never didn't prove itself, we just stopped accepting it. Finula says the water level's been a bit low here. It has for a lot of people, Finula. You look at what's going on in the world at the moment. If you're coming from your intuition, you can see that we're in the midst of enormous change. And often change can appear negative because we like to be comfortable. We like to sit nice and cozy where we are and feel that everything's okay. And change can be very uncomfortable. When you're standing in your intuition, however, you can look at what's occurring without stepping into the fear of mass consciousness. Amanda says, do we sometimes use our intuition unconsciously? I would say we always use it unconsciously. The intuition doesn't switch on and off. What switches on and off is our willingness to hear it. But it's always there and it's always talking to us. It's whether we are listening or not. And Clara says she thinks that trust is a key aspect. We don't trust our intuition. That's true. Because the intuition is often intangible. Because you can't see it, touch it, taste it, smell it, then perhaps it's not real. However, we can see so many things, we can touch so many things, and they're not real. You've only got to look at the movies and see how they use a green room to get people to do things, and then they put the background in so that, oh, suddenly what you've got is something very different. They say the camera doesn't lie, doesn't it? Bronwyn says, was there one thing that occurred to shift you back into listening to trusting your intuition? Yes, there was. I found that my health suffered. I developed a form of asthma which was called nervous asthma. And I used to get panic attacks, anxiety attacks. When we don't allow the energy to flow through us, then our central nervous system gets overloaded. It can't cope. For me, what happened then was I would find I couldn't breathe, and I used to have to carry a brown paper bag around with me so that when I started to hyperventilate, I could breathe into it and bring myself back. It's a real passion killer when you're with your fiance and you're going out for an evening, let me tell you. So yes, at that point it was, well, I have to do something about this. And I hadn't really got around to it until Julian was born and I almost died. I went through the tunnel, and at that point I knew, because I was sent back, that I had to reconnect and start to work with it. It's not always that dramatic. Julie asks, is the plan for us to find it through life experience? Some do, some don't, and the new era energy is really giving opportunity to make a bigger leap, to embrace our intuition and live with spirit in partnership. We've never lost it. That's what I guess if I only say this tonight, your intuition isn't lost at all. Your intuition is alive and well, and it keeps prompting you. It's not your gut instinct. It's that little voice that says, yes, I can. Try this. It's okay. That's your intuition at the most basic level. It's encouraging you. Anita says, would it be that sometimes you start with your intuition and if you don't stay aware and hold it through to fruition, it dilutes and ends up something else? Then you have to start again. Well, yeah, we start with an intuitive thought, a bigger picture, and then the mind comes in and says, I know how to do this. It's okay, guys, step back. I can take care of this. And of course, the moment it does that, it starts to control. And at that point, you leave your intuition behind. So it's about always coming back to the heart. Is this really what this is about? Is this really where I'm going and what I'm doing? Is this my purpose? So yes, Anita, I'm glad that I was sent back too. So Fanula says, and when I've trusted my intuition to make a big move and found myself somewhere very unexpected, I've stepped into fear and judged myself instead of hanging in there. Yeah. Because you know what? And this is where I think it's interesting for people. Your intuition will take you where you need to be. And often where you arrive is unexpected. In that moment, if we're not careful, our mind steps in, or our emotional body steps in. There's a judgment or a fear. If when we arrive at somewhere expected, we say, well, I would never have chosen this, so there's obviously something significant here for me. Let's see where it takes me. Then you flow with the energy and your intuition becomes stronger and stronger because you're allowing it to guide you without controlling the outcome. The mind controls the outcome. Your intuition says, here's a picnic, see which food you like. By the way, we'll make sure none of it's poisoned. The mind will say, hang on, we better get somebody to taste it first. So yes, as Amanda said, it's the small prompts. It's like the nudges that you get. And Sarupa says she's found that nothing often comes until the first intuitive step was taken, and too often one asks for more steps. Guess that's the mind and emotions. Absolutely. If you have a feeling to do something, don't sit and plan how it's going to end. Do it. Take the first step and see what comes out of it. The ancients were connected to their intuition because they were connected to the earth. We're not. We live in concrete spaces. So unless we're out in nature, sometimes it's difficult with all the noise of mass consciousness to hear. And that's why I say to people, go and sit outside, put your feet in the grass, lean up against a tree. Just that connection to the elements can make a big difference. The more we sit in our boxes, the worse it gets. And there was a study in the States where they put Native American students into square buildings and they couldn't feel their connection. They took them out and they put them into round buildings and away they went. They powered it. So if you take nothing else from this, there's a couple of things. Don't try to control your intuition. It's not about control. Let it guide you. And be willing to see where it can take you. After all, when we work with our intuition, life's an adventure. And it's a really good adventure when we stop worrying about what other people think, we stop worrying about whether the world's going to end, we stop worrying about whether we know enough, are capable enough, are we going to survive. If you let all of that nonsense go and just say, if I'm being guided to do this, there's a reason and a purpose, then it becomes joy. Yeah, Julie, that is why you can feel the peace when you go into nature, because the elements are all in harmony and there's no control there. Everything is doing what it came to do in its own place, and it's not worried about anybody else or anything else. The tree grows into a tree. It doesn't care whether a blade of grass is going to be a good blade of grass. And it doesn't care whether the blade of grass thinks it's a great tree. It just does its thing. And so the more you allow your intuition to flow, the more you go in circles. And circular energy, yes, Fianula, circular energy is universal energy. The universe doesn't operate in boxes. Because if it did, let me leave you with this thought, if it did, every planet would be a box. Can you just get that visual of a square sun with lots of square planets circling, going in squares around it? That's the mind. We have circular planets with lots of circles around lots of stars. And that is the universe. So, I hope you've enjoyed this. If you've got any questions at all, if you'd like to go into it in any more depth on another talk, then drop me an email, put a comment in the box below. Until then, have an absolutely great time, and I'll talk to you later. Thank you for joining me. Good night.